Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Army Painting Series 11. Yeah, this is Series 11. This one that got interrupted a while back. Long story there, but long story short, this is episode 2.5, and the idea is we're going to do another color test figure with a whole different set of colors because we did this already. We did this color test figure, but I don't even remember what figure colors that I used, and I actually just basically what I did was I didn't watch any of the previous episode, and I want to see if I can match this because we're always talking about having to match paint colors, right? And what better way to do that than with just a whole different set of paints and see how well we can do that. Now we are just going to do the banner guy here, and we are going to have on the yellowish side of things here we've got, and these will be all pro acryls here. We got the dark golden brown, the black brown, then we've got golden brown, golden yellow, and then we've got our dark blue and blue black. It's a little effectively these are think of these as the blue liner, think of this as the sepia liner, think of this as brown liner if you're looking at Reaper colors. Now here, this is something that we did not have the first time around for sure because it's one of the new colors. And I do believe this is one that I think we had that first. Actually, this was the first time I used it, really, was on that Baratheon guy and really liked it so much. And that's when its power just came to the fore. So what we are going to do is we're going to maybe throw in some other ones too. There's some lighter colors here, like a bright ivory. We'll pop that onto the palette too. And I think you can see some of the purples in here, right? Especially over there. And the idea is, can we replicate this in a reasonably fast way with potentially several new colors? And how close can we get to that? And then we'll just proceed with the rest of the series with these colors that you're going to see out in the palette. And we're going to put those on the palette next and get this party started. We'll get this started with some of those initial glazes and shaded base coat that we talk about all the time. We've got this is the blue-black over here. We've got our blue, let's see, what is that again? That's the blue-black. This is the dark blue up here. Blue-black. There's your faded ultramarine. We don't need to look that one up. And there's your faded plum over there. Black-brown, dark golden brown. I just wanted to show you something real quick here. So talked about substitute for sepia liner. Now, I did this on, I think it was a Twitch episode here, but that is about as close as you can get. It's a tiny bit of difference maybe, but like I say, there's paint colors in every range if you look for them. Golden brown, golden yellow, there's your bright ivory. That's enough. Let's do this thing. And again, we're looking for that purple, bluish gray. So let's get this started and think of this as, in effect, something akin to your blue liner. Now, I'm pretty sure we were still doing sponge things at the time. We could still do a sponge deal with this here too. I mean, what the heck? You know what? Let's keep that tradition going here. But you can see there's a little bit of variance there as we throw in some of the blue black, which is, it's just more of a grayish type of a color. And we are gonna, this is again using almost a little bit more along the contrast paint lines here when you think about it. So I think I'll just keep one element of this the same here. Now you can see by thinning that down, don't necessarily need to rely a whole bunch on taking the color away, and we're not even going to worry about where there's some yellow. There's not a whole bunch of yellow actually on the Wardens, as opposed to, say, some of the other, like the Stag Knights. So we're just gonna grab ourselves some sponge here. Now these are already sliced up. We're just gonna remove a bit there. As I said, it's been a while since we did the sponge thing. It's not like there's something wrong with that or it's totally invalid. We'll just see. We'll bring that back. Why not? Why not bring that back? Which is interesting because in the more recent oil things, we've kind of taken that step away. All right, so good to go there. Let's just do the hammer here instead of that blue. This is where we're gonna go maybe a little bit more towards the blue black here. And then once again with our sponge here. So it does more than just make it darker. It's tinting that. It's giving us some kind of a color range. It's also tinting our fingers. It gives you a little bit more of a color range to work with from the start. It gets rid of that blank canvas syndrome that we talk about all the time. When you throw something on the canvas, anything on the canvas, in this case, this combination of the blues and the blue grays and that sort of thing, straight away your brain maybe gets a little bit de-stressed because there's something there. There's literally a bit of shading there even. So you got some color, you got some shading, and even if this was not something that's supposed to just be your fun thing or something that sort of calms your nerves or whatever, the more relaxed you can make that and less stressful you can make it, it's all the better. And that is one way of just not getting all, because I've seen people get themselves into a frenzy, just anxious, really scared to the point where they don't even try painting that day at all. They just, I don't need this stress. I got enough. There's more than enough stress already. The universe lives to stress you out. So yeah, don't assist the universe in stressing you out. But we'll do that. We will take this approach then on the. I do believe it's going to be the 10 remaining wardens. We'll just do that. Keep it simple. So not everything changes one to the next. And this would have been blue liner for sure. If you're thinking Reaper clear paints and stuff, and liner paints, think blue liner. Maybe a tiny bit of brown liner or something like that in some areas to make it. No, that's not a claw. That is armor. To take it away from the, ironically enough, from the blue, or we could even have mixed, say, a bit of clear purple in there. That could have been good, or clear red, actually. No, the red liner. Blue liner, red liner. That would have been a fun combination there. Now, I think we're good on our blues. We will now transfer over to some of our browns here. Now, let's do our hammer first here. I'm gonna have to look at the one to see if I've got these guys wearing gloves or not. Sort of ish gloves. We'll see. We only have the one. That's the one positive thing about you do the color test figure. Let's say you get down to the rest of the figures and you go, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? Something along those lines. And you say, you know what? I'm going to make a change here. I'm going to change my color test figure because I don't want to have to deal with that. Nothing wrong with that. You adjust the color figure. We even talked about this. I know, I don't remember if it was a recent one or not, but I do remember, I'm pretty sure it was on an army painting episode or something along those lines, where we said, you know what, sometimes the color test figure is working one way, and you say, you know what, that's going to be just too difficult to do on every single other thing here in the army, then you just make that change. And that's just fine. Not a big deal. And we're going to thin that down a little bit, make it a little more liquid, as you do. And we are just going to take some of that, I almost call it sepia liner, some of the dark golden brown. I don't care if the blue mixes into it because, well, we're still just in our base coat mode, and we actually have to make sure that this sepia color spreads around. We got to get some of the blue into the brown and some of the brown into the blue. And I do believe that is, yeah, that's, yeah, maybe. Let's throw a little bit of the brown there. But now we're going to our sepia over here on the banner. Now this, if you saw and you gotta, well, don't worry if you don't get to see the Twitch session before it goes away, because I'm so new on that while my videos disappear after 2 weeks, it appears that I was able to at least somehow salvage the raw video of it. Remember, I have to use OBS for that, so it works so different from XSplit, which is what I'm using now to record this. I think I've got the raw footage, I think I can turn that into something for you guys. So you'll be seeing a lot of these colors again. Like I said, you don't have to rush over to Twitch like, oh my gosh, if I don't watch it now, I'll never get to see it. I will see if I can't turn that into some kind of episode. You never know. Sometimes footage that runs that long can get a little bit weird, but we'll see. We shall see. We're just gonna throw a bit of, you know what? Well, I have to do another one of these Baratheon Warden's units here, and I'm just realizing that maybe I make the face shields here golden or something like that. Something I can do that's maybe a little bit different. I am going to see if I can't throw a little bit of something that is not blue down in there. I'm just doing this while some of the rest of the blue is just going to have a chance to dry. And let's see if we can do a little bit of wet blending here on the banner. We did this on the Twitch broadcast. Now, the thing is, unless you're doing this in oils, you have no chance of an opportunity to do wet blending on a whole unit. Yeah, you can throw some mediums out there, and I've done that too. And it does extend the drying time a little bit, but only so much, and certainly not when you're working on a unit of a dozen of these. That's just not gonna work. So we'll just throw that right there and be okay with that. Now we're gonna go back to our blues here. Now you see we've got our one reference up there. Let's start to go get some of our faded ultramarine into the mix here. And in some ways it's going to seem like, well, wait a second, you're just darkening it down again. Really not what's happening. Not exactly what's happening. Now, the other thing I will say, boy, it's been a while since I worked on any of these Song, Ice, and Fire figures. as we throw in a little bit of the white now to change the color a bit here. You have to, it's hard to find the mold lines. It, sometimes you have to actually prime the darn thing to go, oh, well, that's where that mold line was. I knew there had to be one there. I just couldn't see it. Maybe it's because the plastic has that color on it, as opposed to basically resin, everything else. Sorry, that's just gray. And it just seems to be easier to spot the mold lines when it's just a flat neutral color. Kind of makes sense when you think about it. So when you're doing these, you just have to kind of accept the fact that, oh, wow, look, there's a mold line. Oh, look, there's another one. And you'll just sort of keep finding those. Fortunately, the Steino Res can be used for brush on, not just for spraying on. Say, you know what, I'm just going to brush on my primer now. Yeah, you'd file that down. Like this piece here needed to be filed a little bit extra. I think I can turn my brightness up a scotch here. Already starting to think about potential placement of reflected light, that sort of thing. Let's get a little bit of our faded purple here. And I know that I have, what is the term that I'm looking for that seems to be all the sketching. That's the term that's all the rage these days. I guess you could call this sketching. We're just right here, very in a rougher way, nothing super precise. You can. This is why it's not just base coat, because we are actually adding genuine shading here. It's not the final shading. It's nothing smooth, but still shading nonetheless. And from here we can still modify it. We can add on to it. We just want to get things started here. So chainmail's in there. What have we here? I think we gotta, yeah. And all the time looking for some of these linear effects. That's going to happen more with the very dark colors or the darker colors and some of our lightest highlights. But you can see we're back to the big old brush here. Back to our big old brush. As always, we're working locally, but we're thinking global here. We want to think about the whole figure all at once. And see, we have a decent little edge on our beat up old, well, it's not a beat up old craft brush, but our little inexpensive craft brush, or economically friendly craft brush. Because, right now, just because of different, well, we'll just sort of take current factors where, well, potentially you don't even get to go buy certain things, colors and brushes and the stuff that you would normally say, oh, well, I'm going to head out and go get this and be right back. Well, you're in a different world right now, and that means improvising. And sometimes, now, if you have a bunch of these less expensive crash brushes sitting around, this might keep you up and running, keep you operational for longer, because these will take a real beating here. There's a dozen of them in a package, and even me, I can make a package of those last for a little while. And I just sort of, now I need them for classes and other things, which you don't have to worry about, but they're cheap enough to stockpile when things are kind of okay. stockpiling Winsor Newton Series 7s, that's another that's a that's another league that is out of my cost affordance league right there. I can't do that. There are definitely people that can, but probably maybe a lot of you can't necessarily do that sort of thing. So you have to be able to just sort of adapt, move on as we add more of our faded ultramarine in here and just not final highlights. We're working our way through this here. Where is light coming from above? Where's reflections coming from below? And that really does end up being a lot of it. You're figuring out where things like reflected light go, reflections, all that sort of stuff. Like under here, we need something under there. Unlike the stagnites that I was working on before this, you don't quite have as much of the yellow spread everywhere, which was really, it was kind of fun because it made the reflected light game a whole lot more interesting. A whole lot more interesting. Also have to keep in mind these guys are going to be a tad bit just overall darker. Just a wee bit darker overall. Obviously, we are not doing the Sky Earth, not like that Lannisters series. Well, that was the very first Song of Ice and Fire series, way back in the day. That was a long time ago. It's weird because in some ways in my mind that wasn't that long ago, and then it's when I go look for the files, when I look for the pictures, like I did today, because somebody want to see some of the back. Oh my goodness, that was a long time ago. So that is why you're going to see some evolution when you watch those older series, and then you watch me now and you say, well, wait a second, you didn't do that before. I said, no, I did not, but I do now. And who knows, this could be even with sort of preserving that initial bit of where we take the sponge and such, that could still be really different than, say, what I did on that first Baratheon Warden. Probably, wow, I'd have to say at least 8 to 9 months ago. Because we always talk about things like the shaded base coat. Does it make it easier to sort of revive a project when you've gotten away from you, or you had to get away from it, or for whatever reason you were interrupted on it? Now, this was not an intentional thing. This wasn't some kind of thing where you know what, I'm going to be real clever and I'm going to set up a situation where I don't get to work on an army painting series for several months and then we start it back up again. No, that was, believe me, not part of the plan whatsoever. It was not part of the plan. I'm sure the way this entire 2020 has gone for everybody was in no people's plans. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I don't think people were counting on something like this, so that's another illustration of why something like that shaded base coat, where you don't need to go, oh, it's how, which color red did I do here? And yes, I know there's apps now that help you to remember those sort of things, or you just use that thing called a pencil and the other thing called the piece of paper and you write it down. Yes, physically writing things can sometimes be good. Now we'll go up a bit more here. And what we'll do then from here, again, this is just quick little shaded base coat here from here on. Then we start to get into the midtones. We'll work on the banner especially. We'll really focus on more of the yellow areas, but definitely sort of tack over to things like the midtones in our next segment. That's usually how this works. Now, too, the other thing that I am just mentally calculating here is just filming the unit itself, because I have to refamiliarize myself with these, because what's the whole point of doing a color test figure? It's to get you familiar with what you're looking at. And hence this episode 2.5 here, essentially to show you when you inevitably run into a situation like this. And in fact, I think your situation is more like this than mine. Yeah, I think you are more prone to having your painting not just disrupted but kind of ended for vast periods of time. So I think this should have value for everybody here, no matter what, if you're a commissioned person or not. I do think it'll help you. Again, speaking of help, I'm trying to help out some of these shadows here, trying to give those the reflected light. There's also a lot of chipping going on here. I did not really know that. Again, did not study these in advance. Didn't want to do that. Just trying to make it where, how can I say it, where I'm sort of dealing with a lot of the same tactical things that you are as you try to paint these guys. And remember, this is as light as we want to go. We don't want to be hitting any kind of super bright highlights yet, because believe me, we're still only, that's, geez, a 3. If you're talking 1 is the lightest, we're maybe at a 3 there, potentially closer to a 4 than a 3. So we're leaving ourselves some space yet to go, and thinking about these chains of highlights here again that just sort of work their way down. And what we're going to do next is we'll start working on our yellows to get the banner here and whatever that stuff is. And we're going to do that next. We're going to move towards our yellows here, and that means, boy, I almost called it sepia liner again. We are going to take some of that dark golden brown. We will mix it with some of the golden yellow. Where are we at? Here we are. Now that, boy, at first I thought maybe that was some kind of scale mail there for a second, but no, that's just, that is a unusually shaped padded armor. So we'll go with that. I don't really care, just some stuff gets on the stag here, whatever. But my goodness, now you know me, my favorite thing ever is not sculpted designs on things like banners or even skin, where basically the so-called the tattoo has essentially been basically sculpted into the skin. I'm not a huge fan of that, and I also have to say that, I mean, that is a monstrous sculpted stag that I realized they were trying to give people maybe some shape to work with, but that might be a tad bit too much there. It's a lot of shape. Oh my goodness. We'll work with it. We'll do what we can. Now we do want to go with that, a sort of a black around the outside there. Now I may throw the coal black out there instead of just, or transparent black. That's, yeah, I'll probably use that. Probably use that. Now it's going to be mixed with the blues. It's not just going to be transparent black. We're not doing that. Remember, we black really not a color. It's sort of the kind of absence of color. So we don't want that. We can use it to darken things down, of course. So we're going to just throw a little bit of the, again, that sepia color in there. And I'll just keep calling it sepia, so might as well get used to it now. I do believe those were also gold. I'll double check later. Not a big deal right now for sure. But keep in mind that this golden yellow, yes, it's yellow. And I realize Imperial Fist painters everywhere are going, oh my gosh, yellow. Well, you'd be amazed at how this covers. It's pretty spectacular. And here I am intentionally trying to take away some of the coverage. I don't want it to cover a whole bunch. But boy, it really does. That can really cover. Pretty wild what that can do. And even here we can just start to... There's some wet paint there. Not worried about what happens to the stag because... Well, we have to go over the top of that with our... Basically, a really dark bluish gray. That's what it's effectively going to be. Is a dark bluish gray. And how much more there? Okay, let's hit this here. And like I said, this is not just like with the armor there. It looks a lot lighter, but it's really not. It's because everything that we already had out there is so it's already so dark. That's the key thing is if you have those darks well established, well then your next colors they're gonna look that much lighter. So one way to tell actually, do I have that strong value pattern just there? Is it in place already? But this is the nice thing, even a newer brush that has the sharp edge, it still will sort of splay out and do that really nifty. I love it so much. It'll do that filbert brush type of thing. See where it expands a little bit, but you can always still then tighten that up. Now we get our sharper point out of that. Now we do want some reds. Well, that's where the burnt sienna is going to come in. Because we'll mix some of that into our golds here, and we don't want it to just be, well, progressively lighter yellow or progressively lighter tan. We want it to be in some areas more orange, in some areas darn near more green or blue or whatever. That's what's going to make that yellow not just more interesting, but more convincing, believe it or not. If it's just a solid sea of day glow yellow or whatever, that's not going to... They'll look at it and they'll say, yeah, okay, it's yellow, it's got some shading, but do I believe it? Does that look like it's actually in some kind of an environment? Especially when you got other guys and the floor that has the marble, whatever it is that they're walking on that has that dark, super dark blue. That is basically a blue liner type color, but I'm thinking actually the dark blue and some transparent black could effectively make you something like a blue liner. Yeah, we'll dive into this a bit more. Now always keep it in mind that as we work into this yellow here, that might start to say, you know what, maybe we'll just reflect a little yellow over here. Sometimes you push it, especially here where you got the big old unit. Sometimes you just do something where you go, if this was a one-off figure, I probably wouldn't do it. But there's going to be 12 of these guys jammed together on a movement tray to make this at least appear. Because otherwise, what's the point? We talk about it all the time. Remember, how long does a given thing take? Now, on this banner, I am tempted to not really do too much in additional little freehand things, especially with that stag stands out so much because it is 3D sculpted in there. I don't know if I want to have sort of a competing texture there. Maybe that's not going to be the best idea in the world. But what is a good idea is to actually get a little bit of yellow reflected there. And I suppose it's important for me not to almost create the impression that the yellow there, that's cloth instead of, well, actual physical pieces of metal that just happen to be yellow. And we keep working on our flag here, and we've slowly some of these tricky folds here. That is another thing that can happen with your 3D sculpting is things like banners and cloaks. They can get a little bit flattened out. It's almost like some wet paper or whatever that has been spread out a bit to form a banner. And at a certain point, then we say, okay, we've got that reasonably well set. Now, of course, because that thing is sculpted, so I might even have to go a little bit more here with my. I'm going to throw the tiniest touch of the bright ivory. I mean, we're talking ever so slight of an amount because my goodness, does it have a huge effect? It has a major effect. Because from here, then we can. I'll see if I can't find some of that transparent black, and we'll try and mix it with our dark blue and see what happens. Because yeah, there's no way if the transparent paints were around when I did this, they were only just coming online. Now let me see if I can't find me some of the transparent black in here. Oh, we got transparent brown. Here we go. Here's a little bit of this. We're just going to give that a shake. We haven't used it in a few days, so always best to just give it a little bit of a shake. Let's throw it over here. Okay, I don't need a whole bunch. So we are going to do move our water out of the way here just to make some room for me. And now we've got something that really is so close to blue liner. That is just so close to blue liner. Now it will be, it does have some different properties than blue liner. It's definitely thicker than blue liner. That the transparent black, not so much, but we also remember we added some of that regular pro acryl to it in the form of the dark blue. So you can see just how dark just how dark we can make that. We'll have this be black here too. Why not? We can always go back in here. This is another one. Another area there where it's just things like crazy things like mold lines sometimes just sneak in. Sometimes you just can't avoid those darn things. They can be really, really sneaky. They can really find their way past your file. But that's where the Badger Steiner res comes in handy because you can just brush it on. We did it for years. Heck, I know the Rohan Army series, I just brushed the primer on there. That's it. I think, yeah, and all of them. And I even did a little bit of the pre-shading kind of stuff. In some ways, believe it or not, and we always called it primer painting. That's a little bit easier than, say, trying to use the airbrush to get some shading. It's just to get this thing covered in primer, way easier with the airbrush. But if you want to get some of that pre-shading, believe it or not, it may look like, because you just kind of take your lighter color primer, right? You hold the airbrush over the figure and you spray down, and boom, you got some kind of a gradation there. Well, you sort of do, but there's an awful lot of parts where the primer doesn't really get, at least that lighter color does, or secondary layer, whatever you want to call it, even if it's not primer. Now, what I'm going to do is use this like what I would do with blue liner here, and start to think just like with highlights, some linear things, right? Let's get a harder edge on that. There's an awful lot of slicing and dicing on this armor, that's for sure. Very interesting. That most definitely needs some dark there. I do have to keep in mind that the whole general idea of this is that the armor is relatively more dark than a typical sort of steel armor would be. It's not really that chrome look to it. I do need to get, I almost called it blue liner. I mean, it basically is blue liner paint. We've sort of mixed that in. That, again, that's the transparent black and some of the dark blue together. How's about, yeah, I'm just going to reinforce some of these lines. And then from there now we can take some of this. I keep calling it a blue-gray. It's almost, gray liner is more towards the red. I was almost going to say maybe this could be a bit like gray liner, but gray liner definitely, in comparison to this, has red in it. That's a minuscule amount, negligible for sure, but still enough. We need to get some. It's basically a cylinder here. Basically a cylinder, so that's why we're thinking these long vertical lines going down. And I can go a couple of ways with this. I'm just going to take the bright ivory here. We'll mix it with our blue-gray, and the idea is to get introduce a few different colors into the armor there, but then I mean, we got this big old stag sculpted in here, so we're going to try and get some shading on there, but it can't be so much that it eventually starts to just rival the figure. We don't want that. Yeah, we're trying to keep this, basically black. Blue black, really, but it is as close to the armor on the Warden as possible, but with a little bit of a twist. Maybe this is going to be a bit more neutral. That's why I'm adding this instead of going with the more purple type colors here, like the faded ultramarine and the faded plum, which those will work their way significantly into the armor, possibly into things like the yellows where the cloth is. I did do some of that on the stag knights, and that gave me an interesting result in some places. So you can already see how far away from black we're moving that, and it wasn't black. We already took away some of the black just by adding that little bit of bluish gray. Back to our stag here. This section of our banner for sure. But if we lighten it up too much, then not really going to be convincing as anything that would be black. In fact, we don't have a whole lot more in the realm of highlights that we can put there without suddenly losing that effective black. So I am actually going to go over here. It's going to effectively warm that up even more. And since now that, this is one of the reasons why this series has restarted, it's basically a part of a commission, so these have to be done and out of the way. So that just changes things. Some would maybe think of it as more of a traditional gray, I guess. No, it's lighter than this, but see how it says neutral gray on there? It's actually an important thing. And all of I think all of the creature caster grays or anything like that will say neutral on it. And we say, well, what's neutral? What's that supposed to mean? Well, it means that it shouldn't be almost towards the reddish side of things, and it shouldn't be too much towards the bluish black. It should be literally a neutral, kind of split it down the middle, gray. Now, that's not always really possible because you're talking about paint formulations and such, but they really do, they're a stickler for that sort of thing. So there may be something just in the numbers and the analysis of it that is okay, that is sufficiently neutral. What does that mean? It means, well, it's not too warm, not too. So this I can see is already more tannish. This the gray that we're putting here almost has a little bit more tan than sort of a bluish gray, and that's a good thing. That is a good thing. Now, what we're going to do in our next little foray here is we are going to do things like the banner pole, just a couple of little odds ends before we really start to dive back into things like the armor. We got these stag horns up there, a little decorative element on top of this banner here. It's one of the reasons why I figured, you know what, we'll separate this guy out from the other remaining 11 and use him for our second color test figure. Because he's a unique pose, and sometimes it's actually a little bit better if you get, say, one unique pose or a couple of unique poses, maybe something like a second cohort test figure. It's not the worst thing in the world. So there might be other series. Now, probably not due to similar circumstances as what happened here, but you might see some series that kind of stop and start. Just trying to, again, not take that too far away from that black or dark gray, but we're doing some linear things there. It's a little tougher, trickier here. See, there's a series of these vertical lines here along the hammer there. Now, I'm going to not get too crazy with this neutral gray working its way into things like the armor, because that's what all the purple is for. It's what your faded plum is for and all that sort of good stuff. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll say that is good enough for this stage. And what we're going to do then, we will move on now. And we'll work with some of the yellows here and also so there's not too much going on here with those colors on him. So what we're going to do, before we start getting into the lighter things there, we're going to work on banner poles, odds and ends, that sort of thing. And we'll be right back with that. I did add a little bit of a extra color here throughout this burnt sienna, because on the color test figure, some parts of there's a little touch of an orangey tint there and some of the darker points in the yellow. So I thought that could be useful in a few ways, especially like here. So we are going to make some of the banner here just a touch more orange. I mean, it's subtle. It's really subtle, but because if I want to, now of course with the Stag Knights there was much more of a greenish look to them because they had effectively cloaks that went right down to that dark blue armor. Here we don't really have that. We've got this banner way up here, not really necessarily going to be affected by quite so many things. So see in there, we sort of can build in a few extra transitions. We are going to do that here too. Might even throw a little bit of that here, and I think we will just put a couple little indications of that here too. It's not so much about making something lighter, just about a little bit of a color switch there. Now we've got, where are we at here? I'm going to go over here. We are going to actually take some of the faded plum of all things and mix that with that dark brown, and we'll start to work on a few things like our. Now I think on the Stag Knights I actually had that be a little bit more towards the burnt sienna side of things, but there's supposed to be, oh gosh, it's the phrase we always get a chuckle about, similar but different. It's since there's 2 units of wardens here, we've got to get those looking close enough to each other. Now the other unit of wardens will be doing some different thing. I think we'll actually have some black where there's yellow here. So we'll switch these, basically reverse those. But I want to use some oils there, because why not? Let's see if we can get we know how we can get the sort of more of the sky blue type metal colors with oils. We did that with the Mountains Man, but something like this darker, more purple type of. Can we do that? I don't know. We'll find out. Now it's going to be, again, a bit more of the faded plum. And remember, the idea here is we're not making it look purple. It's just going to look like some kind of grayish brown by comparison. But it also now, see how it sets that, our banner, the black that we use in the banner, it sets that down a bit because that's more of a blue. Even as neutral as we were trying to make it, it still has just a touch of blue, especially in comparison to, well, the faded plum, which is definitely pushing things towards the red. Where else are, okay, yeah, let's make sure we get the. Now, of course, these are probably, some kind of, in reality, some kind of metal or whatever, but I didn't want more gold up there, and I didn't necessarily want a regular metal color. So we'll do this in whatever here. That's it. Now, when I do the banner, because there's going to be a banner in the other unit too. There's one in every. It sounds like a breakfast cereal. There's one in every box, but there is a banner, with the exception of a couple of units that just don't have them. Chiefly the, what are they? The free folk, yeah. Those guys don't really have a whole bunch in the way of just banners in the units. Yeah, let's go over here. Taking a little bit of our faded ultramarine. No, not faded, faded plum. Sorry. It's faded plum. It's going to challenge. Is it a rival to faded ultramarine, or is it a partner to faded ultramarine? It's yet to be determined. Now, the other thing is, since I only have the one color test figure over there, I am actually going to go with more burnt sienna on the handles of the axes, or the hammers, and on this standard right here. I think it's another thing that will set the armor apart just a little bit. There's also this one belt here. There's also something right over there. So, and again, another thing that's going to maybe just give us a little touch of contrast with everything else. So what I'll do is I'll just reverse engineer the handle on the other banner, because it's the only or other hammer. It's the only one we did. This is color test 2.0, even though it's episode 2.5 we're calling it. Almost forgot this one, or this side over here. But it still is actually mixing with the sepia. And I'll just keep calling it that. Now, do I want to throw a touch of our bright ivory into that? But I still got some of the sepia around there. There we go. Now we've got the rest of his belt to do here. We've got these straps to do. It just, I felt like I wanted I don't know, some kind of a color that actually just did contrast a bit more. I know it's more of a classic sort of wood color, I guess. A lot of people sort of go towards the burnt sienna. They don't really realize it, but they're mostly using burnt sienna, especially, well, any kind of rust effects. Guess what? A lot of burnt sienna in there. We have to make sure it doesn't get too pink, and that's what some of the yellow is for there. And again, I can always glaze over the top of this. Let's say the banner pole just gets too light, and I said, yeah, not what I was looking for. I can always glaze over the top of that. And nothing is set in stone, and really there is no need to be stripping figures down. My goodness, I'll see someone basically strip down the same figure 4 times. And I'm telling you right now, there's a risk of that. It gets counterproductive because you don't feel like you solved anything. And actually, well, this is the and Kathy and I we actually talked about that, and I think she might have made, yeah, she came up with the notion that, okay, you get frustrated, you strip the figure down, you paint it again, and you have success, and you say, oh wow, okay, clearly that was a great thing to strip that down. That taught me something. No, it was, now you don't know. It could have been one little thing that's different that you did, but because essentially the original is destroyed by stripping it, you might not be able to sort of think about, okay, what's different here? Why did it work out this time? Why did it not work out last time? And if you're working on the same one and you're just, I don't want to say fixing it in the classic sense of it, but if you're trying to modify it or alter it or whatever, having basically working over the top of the original could be a good thing. Now, what I'll also try and do is, I don't know, maybe I'll grab the other one and do this real quick to it just to bring it in line. Where'd you go? Here you are. So all I'm doing there is just basically changing the color of the highlight there. Yeah, that belt was barely even done. So we're going to change the belt to, however, we're going to grab some of the black brown at this. Oh, look at this. We never even did these. Well, we did. It's just didn't necessarily focus on those a lot. So this is something we really haven't done too much, is go back and rework another figure like this, because why not? That's what we do. Do crazy things all the time. Where's my, here it is. So now I think yeah, I'll have a little more separation in some of these elements now. I didn't even realize there's some antler type, stag type faces there on the knee pads. That's going to be interesting. I seem to remember that being not the most fun thing in the world to do. I was about a bit more. Again, a little bit of that weight is going to go a really long way. So don't go too crazy with that. And I think that'll get us to a good spot. Now we've coordinated that with what we've got going here. I mean, yeah, is that technically cheating? I suppose so. But it's a whole lot easier to change one figure to match a bunch than the other way around. Now, unless there is some super specific thing, I don't know if it's a Space Marine thing, and you reverse the shoulder pads or whatever. And I've done that where the right shoulder pad was supposed to be red and the other one black and vice versa. And I just, for whatever reason, spaced on it. Sometimes I try to come up with some other alternate explanation for. So why is this different again? And yeah, we'll get one last bit of little brighter light there on our, I'll just say the leather color, such as it is. Normally I would make this wood, say, almost more of a greenish color, but we've got I think we're going to have plenty of greens and other things like that. So I said, no, we won't do that. So yeah, definitely some more turn there. I will see what I can do. There's a couple of darker areas I think I want to restore here. And eventually we will break out that smaller brush. Don't worry, we do have one. We'll go to the Winsor Newtons eventually here, but for now, we're actually going back to our darks. And who knows, there may be some things when we get down to the rest of the unit. So I know I need some kind of yellow in here too. And I even need some of the burnt sienna there. Yeah, a little bit there, and it's going to happen here. I will lighten that up too. So I noticed, I mean, it's very slight, barely really visible at all, but there's some kind of tunic or sleeve here underneath that bit of armor. That's why we just call these, working these extra little details and such here. And another actual piece of, I believe that's armor. We're going to put some reflected light here. That's actually going to maybe change more towards that purple. And that's one of the things, well, let's see. We'll throw some of that out there now. Just, again, a little bit of that's the faded plum there. I will mix it with some of the blue. And again, the idea is not to have this massively visible, like, oh, look at the purple armor. We're effectively tinting it, but it's not a glaze sort of a tint. It's just different kind of, it's a dry tint. Although that does sound a little crazy, but I mean, in some ways it is. That's kind of what it is. So again, trying to find me as many sort of purple tones as I can. And I will, yeah, let's get some of the purple over here. Let's get some of it onto the armor here. Helmet. Who knows, maybe just a few little, ever so slight highlights on that banner and just then leave it. Gotta think reflected light here too. There's essentially none of it there. We don't want that. We'll have to actually make that more of a yellow, that reflected light over there. I may also have to switch over my lights at some point. I know it really does, for whatever reason, like to burn out the figure. Okay, let's go with some reflected light here too. Now we don't have to worry about any kind of foliage on the base or whatever, so, or any of the bases for that matter. I maybe we'll drop some dry leaves or whatever in between some of the broken tile areas, maybe not. This also will need touch of purple. And then remember too, we have to go back with some of our darker colors too. Basically our sort of blue liner substitute, I guess, if you want to call it that. So really think of this as really a middle tone. And what we're going to do is we'll play here with our color intensity. So you can see a lot of this is, you can't really tell there's a color difference. The value difference is kind of the same. We have a lot of the same values. That's that extra little form of contrast. It's not always lighter or darker. Not always lighter or darker. And I know that it can be really so hard to wrap your head around that, and I understand that. I know sometimes a few of these concepts, they're not necessarily the first thing that come to mind. Now, part of that is there's been and I really am not the fan of conventional wisdom. This is something I haven't really done before. So I'm working with this is almost basically straight up faded plum. But I'm working in black and white here. You haven't seen me ever do this before. I'm going to add a couple of more here. I'm just waiting until, there we go. So it's kind of obvious that there's some purple there. And then we're going to bring that back. And now you can see this. I was had all this so purple over in there, but it wasn't anything really bright. I need some, oh boy, can I even get a brush back in here? I think so, yeah. We need some over here too. Well, there's an awful lot of chunks and dents in this arm and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And we can reinforce any kind of edge there too. You know, it would normally be something like the blue or brown liner, but in this case, we'll use our homemade liner paint. How does that sound? Okay, so what we're going to do then is we'll sort of advance to those lighter highlights and some of the deepest darks. Okay, that's where we really try to find these kind of elements right here. Okay, so that is what we are going to do next. let's work up some final highlights now. And this doesn't mean jumping right into bright ivory. What it means is, okay, we're gonna create, say, like a this if this is a 1, we're trying to make this a 2 or a 3 over here. We also want to give it some semblance of a color too. Because you want if you're gonna have that really, really bright highlight, that's just gonna be basically a dot. So we want to have the color that leads into that, well, have some kind of actual color to it. Makes sense. And that, I guess, but that could be gold. I'm just looking at that going, what should we do there? We'll just stick with that. Again, trying to do that chain of lights again here, chain of highlights. Trying to think in terms of these linear things. It makes it look more cylindrical, which is sort of the shape that it actually is. And we go. I guess I should really think of it as final highlights and darks. Final highlights, darkest darks. Maybe that should be its title. Even here, again, these are not the brightest highlights. They're getting there. They're getting there. But boy, there's an awful lot. I don't know, these wardens here, their armor not quite in the best of shape, that's for sure. And we'll have to do some lights on the yellows as well. So again, not working with a value here that is white or anything of the sort. Yeah, looking for some just hints of reflected light in some of these spaces. Man, it's all about what is it that you like here. If you've got a starter box with 4 of these units here, and you think, well, okay, just we don't do the scopy basing. Then we don't do that. You just go with regular old rocks and gravel, or you do snow bases, or something that just will maybe take less time. If you were to do the snow basing, well, then now think of you'd have to reflect that obviously onto things like the armor. Just in the same way we're trying to reflect the darker marble colors. Got to do the same thing with snow. Or what if these guys? What is I don't know. Again, I don't know exactly what the difference of things are, but the Stannis, I guess, those are the ones that are more of a green, or maybe that's Renly. I don't know. One or the other is more of a greenish thing. Well, you'd have to reflect some of that green as well, just like we're trying to reflect some of the yellow onto the armor, just some of it. Just some of it. And remember too, if you say, boy, I'm really adding a whole bunch of lighter colors and there's just not much happening, that's where you change tack and you go a bit darker. Oh, what the heck? Let's just have fun with it. We still got our essentially homemade blue liner right here. Now, the thing when you've got all of these little, whatever the heck these are, or chips or dings or dents or whatever, that are running through every part of this, it can sometimes make it a little bit harder to translate the shape as well. So something to think about something to think about. But this is where we'll get that extra little bit of definition up there. That's where we sort of made a bit of a color change. We can even think about, and this is it's a quick little pattern that we threw on one of the other units. I think that was the Stag Knights. And I'll have to see if the Sentinels, I think they also have cloaks of some kind. So this little sort of a leaf, flower design, whatever, it may find its way onto those as well. Now, this would probably be with the rest of the series or whatever, that would be kind of in that final details thing. You probably won't be seeing this until, well, any of this stuff, the final highlights thing, that's definitely a final episode, a final act. All right, I will. Now, what I want to do is just get to that. We're looking for those kind of next generation highlights right here. And you can see the difference that those make right away. We've saved them all the way till the end here. Being patient, because that temptation to just dive right into those brightest highlights, but it's really there. It's kind of always there. And again, see here, once we start to do that, on this part of it, all of a sudden, see that edge really stands out now. Really does stand out. Now maybe some of these little cut mark things, that's where we can really do a bit harder of a highlight. So the mic keeps wanting to hit the table there. That's what that sound is. We certainly need, yeah. See, it's almost like a chain of highlights that goes across the top of the shoulders, all the way over to here, all the way over to this arm. Let's certainly get some of these onto the hammer here. And onto the elbow, and they're broken. See, it's not one continuous line. It's not like you just take a ruler and you draw a line and boom, there you go. It is not a continuous line at all. It's broken up like that. And a little bit goes a long way. It's just like anything else, like with the, well, ironically enough, with the chipping, that's another one of those things that can go a long way, a little bit, instead of too much, because it can get to be too much so incredibly fast. And here on the chainmail too, we've got the bottom end of the standard there. And ironically enough, there is a color even lighter than what it is that we have here. It would be the bright titanium. That's sort of your ultimate weapon right there. That's like the nuclear option for painting white. But you notice we don't use that a whole bunch. It's typically when we're doing things like the non-metallic metals and such. Actually, it could have been really interesting to do these guys in TMM. I will try actually the. I think I've got the Starks or whatever. And I was pondering doing TMM on those. Well, actually, not pondering. It was something that was part of the original plan a long time ago. Like a long time ago. And as you saw by I keep showing that one jar of the creature caster metal medium. Now, can you even see that? You can. Okay, that is something that they started. The first test jar they sent me was December of 2018. That's how long ago that was. That's hard to believe. I mean, pretty not necessarily 2 years ago, but boy, pretty darn close to it. That long in development, and now that I've tried it and I really do enjoy it, I definitely want to do some more with that. Now here on these little filigree pieces, my goal is to just find a few, see, there and there. Now, I don't want to lighten up the whole thing. I don't want to put too much in the way of lights on those no matter what. It'll attract too much attention to an area that's, I don't want to say too insignificant, but it's too insignificant. As we get a couple of more of those again, the highlights a little goes a long way. Gonna try and pick out a few bits of the chainmail as well. See what we can do on the helmet here. Even there with that line that goes across, it's got to be broken up. It cannot be one solid unbroken thing. And I used to do that all the time back in the day, and uh, you live and learn. I guess that's how that works. At least you hope you always learn. That's the goal anyway. Now I'm gonna go back to a bit of the plum over here. That's the faded plum. Where are we at? I think you can see that. We almost don't want to be forgetting areas here. We've got the very important piece right there. And yep, we got to get some on little antler decoration type thing up here. Another highly technical term for that, I'm sure. A bit more here. Let's see if we can't, just a few more. I think that the chest needs a couple. On the armor itself, not only just the golden stag decoration thing there. We've got I think a seam there that also needs a bit of strengthening. And this is something you see with these. I know it seems kind of crazy to just be doing these like alternating lines, but you notice that they sort of originate in one spot. Like here, it doesn't go all the way up to there equally. It just sort of stops. Again, working back and forth between some of those lightest lights and some of the darkest darks. Gonna make sure that we've got some decent separation there. Now, I don't want to really highlight these too much either. I'm gonna grab a little bit of the white in there because I don't want them to again look like actual metal armor, but they need a little bit of a light along that upper edge right there. It puts me in mind of the mountains men. There was some yellow padded armor on them. And even a few little lights on the banner. We've got this, I mean, that is some serious filigree right there. That is some major league filigree there. It's the nature of the figures here, just the way they were, again, cast and sculpted. That there are some details a little bit on the larger side. Then, I mean, maybe you would think they'd be, but it's okay. As I see this here, and I've got a little bit smaller brush to work with, I'd like to get a work in some, again, always thinking reflected light. It does not have to be super bright. It just has to kind of be there. And if I'm going to, yeah, if I'm going to double down on that, I have to be very aware that the reflected light, it can't be lighter than the actual light. That just, you wouldn't believe how tempting that can be, or just how easy it is to lose track of that. It's a little bit like with the oils, where you sort of lose track of, well, how thin have I gone? You know, how thick was that last layer that I painted on here? That's when you're doing the sort of the wet into wet oil stuff. Now we'll just do a couple of little bit of squiggly things here. That's funny, that does mirror so much some of the blue liner. So again, all that transparent black and a bit of the blue, that dark blue. And it gave us something that's a little bit like blue liner. So all we're doing is just a couple of interconnected squiggly lines here. And because we use the transparent black, it did, I don't want to say it thinned down the paint and in the way that maybe people are thinking. Just doing the holding of breath thing here. Again, trying to get things that look like branches and leaves, little small stuff like that. Again, sometimes just the impression of something is better than full-on drawing that design in there. So you can see the difference that that little bit makes versus what we see here. So when we get into the rest of the unit, we'll continue like we did here with doing the sponges. We'll start with that initial glaze. I do believe regular episode 3, it'll probably be ending with the midtones. where we certainly not going to be doing any kind of final highlight things, but that that episode is always one of the weirdest ones to end up with because the figures literally are just kind of in that shaded base coat phase. And you keep thinking, well, okay, there should be more to this, but no, there's 10 figures there, so it's going to mostly focus again on that shaded base coat. And then what happens next? Then we move on to those midtones. Freehand, I don't really see a whole lot of it necessarily for the rest of this unit. I think actually most of the freehand probably happens on this guy. Here, let's see if we can't get a few more of these darker lines on the hammer there. We also need to do some kind of light. Here, we'll just stick with almost kind of a faded ultramarine there. There we go. And then we'll follow that up with some light there. Because we had just, I don't know, somehow something had gotten wiped out there and we just restored it then. I'm going to see if I can't get myself a more structured thing. A little bit of a highlight there. Let's see, the helmet also needs some brighter there. Little line right there. So all of these, again, these little chunk highlights like this. Let's get our couple of, on the, again, the top of the band, a little decoration on there. So we're just about concluded here now. I hope you don't mind that this is sort of a resurrected army series. I really did want to bring it back. I was trying to find some way to actually make that happen. And it just sort of did. I've been really trying, actually, for especially the last few months, trying to basically find some way for it to be possible to complete the series. And I think we are there. And I'm hoping that maybe there's another one of those all cavalry series. It would be the Targaryens or whatever those guys are, the horse dudes. Now, granted, we have the Rohan. We're going to do that too, but these horses for the Song of Ice and Fire, they're pretty massive. They're just, the figures are bigger anyway. It's a bigger scale than Lord of the Rings, but it also means there's more stuff that can be done with those, and there's just more of the horse showing, for lack of a better term. So I think we'll be able to have some fun with that. But I just want to say thanks again for everybody that supports this, especially in the crazy times like this, because I always say it that, well, there just wouldn't be these things without you, but now, especially now, there would definitely not be anything like this. This would not be possible whatsoever. So I just want to say thanks to everybody for their pledges and their help and all that kind of stuff. Always feel free to ask questions. You drop a like on this video. That's always a handy thing too. So thanks again, everybody. And then I'll catch you on episode 3, the big messy shaded base coat episode.